It's the early morning of the 5th of June 2024, and before I hit the bed, I thought I will make a quick video about the election in India, the recently concluded national election in India. Lots of interest in Canada, especially with the dynamics between India and Canada recently. And I felt that I should record something very quickly because a number of people that I talked to leading into this election, were working off assumptions and were feeding into the media frenzy that accompanied this election. So I thought I'll make a quick video. This is completely unbiased position. I just wanted to record this as I wouldn't call it factual, as much as I claim that it's unbiased, there's certain things that I want to see in terms of, the political reality of India. There are certain things that I'm pleased about. There are certain things that I'm watching closely. So I'm sure those biases creep in, but still, for the benefit of people in North America, I thought I'll take a quick moment to contextualize everything and to kind of share where things have landed. So it's a historic third term for the government of the NDA government, which is in layman language, the government of Prime Minister Modi. It looks like with most of the results in, actually, I think all of them are in by this time. It looks like that he's going to be forming his third government and third consecutive, I should mention, which is quite historic. Again, I'm not suggesting whether it's good or bad. I'm also not going to, get into the controversies that surrounded this election. I want to be as fair and objective with what's the situation right now. So before we get into discussing some of the elements of what has happened, let's have a little bit of a background. So just especially for my friends here in Canada, for them to understand, just the enormity of what it takes to have an election in India. The 2024 election saw the highest ever voter turnout in India's history. And again, I'm quoting off the election commissions of India, and I'm quoting off other sources that I found. But to the extent possible, I have tried my best to check this information. But again, without nitpicking the specific of, maybe it's not 642 million, it's 641,897,000, but just to ballpark it, 642 million voters participated out of the 968 million eligible voters. Now just contextualize it against what we do here in Canada with now what we have, 40 million, not even eligible voters, 40 million in population. So 642 million voters participated, out of which 312 million were women, marking the highest participation by women voters till date in the 75 plus year history of India. Another astounding fact, the election featured over 2,600 political parties and more than 8,000 candidates vying for 543 seats in the Lok Sabha, the house that they were all fighting to sit in. So again, to contextualize it, 2,600 political parties with more than 8,000 candidates for the 543 seats that they were fighting for. Electronic voting machines were used across all polling stations, facilitating a smooth and efficient voting process according to the Elections Commission of India. There were a lot of criticism and challenges around the reliability and transparency of these machines, but it's my personal opinion that in having a deployment all across, this is a third world country that we're talking about, and just think of the effort, the energy, the challenge, underscoring India's commitment to leveraging technology in its democratic process. Fourth fact, again for the background, the election was conducted in 7 phases from April 19th to June 1st, 2024. Compare and contrast that to a single day that we spent on the exercise in Canada. And this was to accommodate the vast and diverse electorate spread across different geographical and logistical landscapes in India. So, again, an extensive process that underscores the meticulous planning and execution involved in managing the world's largest democracy. So, for a lot of people who on this end, read all these news items coming through on the political process in India and the politics in India, it's important for them to understand, the reality on the ground over there. Now, the 2024 election, as much as it's been the news that by virtue of being in power for the last 10 years, the government of the time, and truth to some of these elements, I do not want to suggest that all of it was just fancy talk. There was still a vigorous campaign from all major political alliances. So the incumbent National Democratic Alliance (NDA), which is led by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the current Prime Minister, it faced a really strong challenge from the newly formed Indian National Developmental Inclusive Alliance, and the acronym for that is India, which was led by the Indian National Congress and had many regional parties as a part. So again, as much as the existing government had been there for 10 years, there was a competitive political environment, and that again reflects really well on the dynamic and pluralistic nature of the Indian democracy. So, like I said, this is me just giving you the background on it. Now, as I mentioned, 7 phases. Again, for an average Canadian or an American or somebody in the West looking at it from a data point of view, I couldn't find the data on phase 7, so forgive me for that. But let me read out the data for the first 6 phases. And again, as a quick reminder, the 7 phases were conducted between April 19th to June 1st. So we are talking about almost a month and a half of an active election process. And in that, phase 1 voter turnout was 66.14%, and this was held for 102 of those 543 constituencies. Phase 2 had a voter turnout of 66.71% for 88 seats. Phase 3 was 65.68% for 93 seats. Phase 4 was 69.16% for 96 seats. Phase 5 was 62.2% for 49. And Phase 6 was 63.37% for 58 seats. So as you can see, across the first 6 phases, which are the only phases I have data readily available right now, it was consistently above 62%. So 62% or more. So, for anybody doubting and I would say in some cases disrespecting the Indian electorate in terms of their commitment to democracy, those numbers are astounding. So against this backdrop, for what has been a largely peaceful and conducive election, it paints a very vivid picture of democracy in action in India. Where from bustling city centers to remote villages, the polling stations saw a colorful convergence of voters spanning generations and backgrounds. There was some violence. It was quite limited. And again, it's credit to a country that conducted an election for 642 million voters out of the 968 million eligible voters, that the violence was limited to where it was limited. Still, cannot be explained, cannot be excused, cannot be defended. But as I said, I wanted, before I get into where things have landed, I just wanted to contextualize it for everybody. How big, how enormous, and how successful an exercise this was. On top, this year there was an optional home voting facility, which marked a paradigm shift in the electoral process. It was available for first time in the history of India's general election. Any citizens aged 85 and above, or anybody with a 40% benchmark disability, were given the option of voting facility through postal ballot. Again, underscores the commitment all involved, the party in power, the opposition, the machinery responsible for including the Election Commission of India, that efforts continue to be made on the ground in a country with such huge logistical challenges to make sure that voter participation is as high as possible. So again, just wanted to share that in the context of. So the results, like I said, are almost out, and we know what has happened is historic. Against all odds, against everything that comes from the anti-incumbency, NDA has a third mandate. Now, again, it's not a matter of whether I'm a supporter of NDA or I'm not a supporter of NDA. I want to contextualize it in what they have achieved. Third term is not a joke. And if you look at the data, and India being divided into 4 zones, east, north, south, and west, they have had a negative change in 3 of them, east, north, and south, from where they were in 2019, they've actually seen a negative change and have come down. But they've still done better than the opposition in 2 of the 4 zones. So in east, they did better than the opposition, which is NDA did better than India. In west, they did better. So in east, they had 71 seats versus the 45 for the opposition, the India alliance. And in west, they have 97 seats versus the 43 that the India alliance have. In north, they have 59 versus 61. And in south, they have 50 versus 76. So this has to be understood that the electorate in India has spoken strongly and positively to give the power back in spite of all the odds stacked from an anti-incumbency factor. Now, again, like I said, I don't want to get into the advantages and the disadvantages that they had by virtue of being in power. I'm just presenting the data to you in the context of. So, India has a first past the post system where the winning candidate only needs a plurality of the votes, meaning they simply need more votes than any other candidate, not necessarily a 50% majority. In that context, if we look at the vote share of this election, NDA, or the alliance that Prime Minister Modi is the leader of, had a 46.2% vote share, which represents a minus 0.2 shift, but still a 46.2% vote share versus a 41.3% vote share, which represents a 6.99% shift for the opposition. There has been a minus 6.79% shift in the vote share of others outside of these 2 big alliances. But again, NDA has a higher vote share. So first past the post, somebody on TV today on a Pakistani YouTube channel said, and gave the context of the game of cricket. He said, if somebody hits a 6, a home run, he said, it doesn't matter if it is out of bounds by 50 meters or 60 meters or 100 meters. A 6 is a 6, he said. So 2 things. One, the vote share of NDA higher than the opposition. Second, BJP, which is the dominant party of NDA, which is the party of Prime Minister Modi, on its own won more seats than the whole of the opposition put together. So for those who are I heard a nonsensical thing today on TV. There are people who are asking him to resign because, before the election, BJP, and God knows why, because I had called this. I had talked to multiple people on my end where I said it doesn't matter what the media analysts and what the surveys that have been put out say, but I had shared with multiple people that even if BJP or the NDA comes back in power, they're going to come back. They're going to have a coalition. They're not going to get an absolute majority. And that's exactly what the people of India gave them as the mandate. So if we look at it, in both 2014 and 2019 general election, the BJP won a significant majority of seats in Lok Sabha, despite not achieving an absolute majority of the popular vote. It's exactly the same case right now, where they have 46.2% of the vote share versus 41.3% of the vote share of the opposition. But this is a common feature of the first past the post systems, not very dissimilar to how we have it in Canada. Now, we have established that it's still a significant milestone for the current ruling government. But let me bring attention to something else that was being widely said about these elections, that these elections won't be fair, they will be rigged. But that's not been the case. Again, I've been making a case all along, and again, not siding with one or the other, that when you have a democratic system, you need to have a belief in the system. And the people of India have spoken. I'll just bring forward the stats from three prominent states: Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Bengal. Uttar Pradesh had 80 seats in this election, Maharashtra 48, Bengal 42. All three states, which are considered the make or break states in India, the opposition trumped NDA. In Uttar Pradesh, out of the 80 seats, 43 were won by the India Alliance. In Maharashtra, out of the 48 seats, 30 were won by the India Alliance. And in West Bengal, out of the 42, 30 were won by India Alliance. And these are three states where BJP and its partners put in a whole lot of effort to win people over. So where I'm going with that is, in the final results, NDA has 293 seats when the target is 272 in a house with 543 seats. So they have a majority, the necessary majority to form the government. But in my opinion, the opposition, the India bloc, has come out really strong. And I think this is a remarkable success that has to be acknowledged and that has to be celebrated for Rahul Gandhi, Priyanka Gandhi, their partners in Uttar Pradesh, in Maharashtra, and Bengal, where they were able to, through the way they connected with the voters, and where the voters have spoken, to really make a strong case for that. Maybe some of these worries around the elections won't be fair, and there would be just too much of unnecessary, artificial, unintended or intended pressure that will come from a government that has been in power for 10 years. I think the numbers on the ground give us a lot of hope. They tell us that, again, between the strength of the voters and the strength of the democratic system, the system has come back and reminded us that the checks and balances come from just the way the whole system and the institutions supporting it are built. There were conversations on the limitless power. Yes, NDA have been given the mandate, but checks and balances, like I said, have been created by forcing them to work in a coalition, in a Westminster-style democracy with the first past the post. This, in my opinion, is as good as it gets. I already spoke about in the 543-seat House, the India Alliance has a net 103 in gain. So compared to 2019, 2024, they have 103 more seats, whereas NDA has lost 61 seats and others have lost 42. So between the 61 from the NDA and the 42 from the others, the India Alliance has gained, or the coalition over there has gained 103. So I think, again, call me an idealist, call me a romantic, but this is a very strong testament to the power of democracy in a country as complex, as vast, and in some people's opinion, as unmanageable as India. I would like to point out something very specific. Amritpal Singh, who won from Khadur Sahib in Punjab, and Sarabpreet Singh Khalsa, who won from Faridkot in Punjab, both of them independent candidates, both of them sympathizers of things that neither the opposition nor the government in power would have been seen as supporters of. One would have made a very strong case for that folks like Amritpal and Sarpreet should not have won, could not have won, if indeed the case was true that the powers in India are able to fashion and structure the results of a general election. But the fact on the ground is that both Amritpal Singh actually, as we speak right now, is in a jail in Assam. Stood as an independent candidate, and again it speaks to the power of the people on the ground that they voted him into the Indian Parliament. Sarabpreet Singh Khalsa from Faridkot, again being somebody whose name was associated with things that folks in power would not have felt comfortable with. So I wouldn't go into the details of. Anybody who wants to dig those two names up to see what I'm talking about can easily do so, but I just wanted to bring their names forward as examples of, I agreed with people who said that the government in power has power over elections, but that's true for any other country in the world. It's true for Canada. I know people who feel that because Justin Trudeau had a government, people lean a certain way, especially in official positions during the time of the election, but that's true everywhere. The same case could be made for Biden, same case would be made for Rishi Sunak right now in UK. So where I would land with all of this is, I do not want this to be a personal, upload, but I would like to wrap up with a couple of quick points. Let's not disrespect the Indian electorate. Whatever way it worked, the system worked. There was an election. Everybody on the ground over there agrees to the extent possible it's a fair election, especially with the results. Like you have the opposition gaining 103 seats, 61 of those coming from the party in power. So you cannot say that the system did not work. The time though is now to accept the verdict and come together for the next 5 years. Let's salute the Indian democracy, which continues to be a shining example for the rest of the world. And let's agree on a few things, that the 2024 general election results in India, while they may not be what a part of the population may have wanted, they are still representative of the aspirations of 46% of the Indian population. That's the vote share that Prime Minister Modi and his partners got in this election. But I think if we wanted to look at a few things that came out of it, and this is a bit of my personal view on it, I think we saw once again a strong democratic engagement, and to some extent we saw a voter rejection of populism. That despite concerns over the potential dominance of the Modi government, I believe that the voters exercised their rights to voice dissatisfaction with certain populist measures. And this has resulted in a more balanced distribution of power in Lok Sabha, demonstrating the electorate's demand for accountability and moderation in governance. So I think that's a positive, and that's a positive that we shouldn't ignore in the broader scheme of things. Another thing that stood out for me has stood out for me, especially in the results that I see on the ground, is there is a push for the balancing of economic aspirations and social justice. So in my humble opinion, the election outcome indicates a nuanced voter preference, asking for a balance between economic growth and social justice. So while the NDA highlighted economic development and infrastructure projects, I think the India Alliance's focus on welfare schemes, employment, and social equity resonated with many voters. So this suggests an electorate which is keen on a holistic approach to development that includes both economic and social dimensions. And I think that's another important thing that we should not let escape in either the euphoria or the disappointment of where things have landed. The third thing, and this has been the case for the last few decades, the regional dynamics and the coalition politics. Once again, I think 2019 was an anomaly. The regional parties have again come to play a crucial role, with several states voting significantly for local parties over national ones. So this fragmentation of votes highlights the importance of coalition politics in India, where regional interests strongly influence national outcomes. And this ability of parties to form effective alliances and accommodate diverse regional aspirations, I think, will be crucial to the formation of a stable government. And in a way, it introduces the checks and balances that quite a few people were asking for before this election. So again, I think we should salute the Indian democracy and the Indian voter. The electorate does deserve an acknowledgement and a credit. And one other thing that I think stands out is the impact this would have on India's global standings. So I think there's a significant implication. A balanced and representative government is likely to continue India's trajectory as a major global player. India has been insisting on its strategic autonomy while looking to form international partnership. And I think the electorate's decision to favor a more balanced power distribution signifies a commitment to democratic values. It would enhance India's image at a global stage as the world's largest democracy. I think there was a lot of sentiment and a lot of narrative that had started creeping in with regards to the concerns over centralization of power. There was a lot coming in the Western media about the centralization of power under Prime Minister Modi. So while the BJP has retained a significant presence, the opposition gains in several states indicate a pushback against that perceived authoritarian tendency. And I believe that BJP, Prime Minister Modi, would pay attention to this demand for greater decentralization and the democratic accountability. And they should, because I think that underscores the electorate's desire for a check on executive power. And any government that comes together for the next 5 years should look at it, because especially on that side with the centralization of power and the way it is perceived, a lot of youth and first-time voters who shape this election outcome, I think that's a very important thing for them, as also that whole thing of balancing economic realities with social justice. There's a strong inclination towards addressing employment issues and educational opportunities in that segment of voters. So I think the results, the numbers that are there would push the government in the power towards a future focused on those policy demands. So the engagement of the youth and the first-time voters who, in my opinion, listened a lot to, and I'll take a quick example, people like Dhruv Rathi. I have it in my mind to reach out to Mr. Rathi and give this and convey the same message to him that, listen, we all were entitled to our opinion. We all were entitled to our efforts. Kudos to you. I did not think it was apt to jump in and criticize him for some of the stuff that he was doing at that time. It was his right. He should have done it, and he did it, and quite well. I should give him credit for that. But now that the elections have happened, now that the voters have spoken, I think it's time to come together for the next 5 years. So, I plan to reach out to him through a video sometime soon, asking him to come together where I can bring my background and my interest in leadership development to create the next generation of thought leadership in India, where people like him would not have to tell people at the top of their voices all the time that what's happening to them is wrong. So You know, the role of technology and social media in through the 2024 election was unprecedented. You know, digital campaigns, you know, outreach through social platform, use of data analytics to target specific demographics played a critical role. So this, in my opinion, not only highlights the digital literacy elements to the electoral process, but it also identifies a demographic of Indian population that is ready to be engaged at a global level, that is ready to be engaged to help them move the continuum of the heart set, mindset, skill set, tool set, and data set for them in a way that they can take more and more control of their own agency and the future of the country that they are in. And finally, I think the environmental and climate policies also became a bit more prominent in this election. And that sustainable development piece and addressing climate change in the future, I think it's going to be important. The trends on the ground reflect a growing public awareness and demand for environmental accountability. And that's also going to be tied into the geopolitical landscape, particularly India's relationships with neighboring countries, Pakistan including, because climate agreements and global trade, all of these things are going to play a very important role. So, like I said, I didn't want this to become a big, drawn out thing about my own thoughts and opinions, but I did want to take a moment for people to understand what's happening in India. The media coverage in Canada of late has been very critical of India. The whole Hindutva thing has, in my opinion, as a practicing Hindu, has been overblown a bit. Majority of people in India very strongly relate to, subscribe to, practice very secular values. The media over here has been sensationalizing a lot of things. This is where my appeal to people like Mr. Rathi, who, in my opinion, have been doing the same in some way or some form with some things, where it's, in my opinion, things have almost approached making a case for anarchy. I think we need to just understand that the voters have spoken. Hopefully, the politicians got the message, and I'm actually on my end, and I'm really looking forward to some continuity. If we look at what are some of the things that could and would come from another BJP government for another 5 years or third, it would allow for a continuation and an expansion of, you know, some of the projects, some of the reforms. Policies like Make in India around, you know, local infrastructure development and digitization initiatives can be further entrenched, providing continuity and stability that could attract both domestic and international investors. So, the Viksit Bharat 2047 initiative, which aims for significant economic growth and development over the coming decades, those are not bad things. Those should not be let go. So, you know, lots of opportunities, a long drawn out exercise, lots of hope, and I would like to conclude this with a message that let's hope to have more internal political strength and unity. I would really like to see, and I speak for myself, more party cohesion and grassroots strength building. And with that hope in my mind, and with the bestest of wishes for the new government in India, everything on the ground right now points to it being a third term for Prime Minister Modi, who I would like to congratulate for his victory, for the significant success. Like I said, it's not a joke for somebody to get a third term, especially with a population and an electorate as big as India. So with that, I will conclude this here, but I would really like for you to subscribe to the channel. I'll continue with my journey to build more of leadership, management, and business specific content, as also content specific to Canada. With that, I take your leave. And again, to all the voters in India, my heartfelt thanks and my heartfelt congratulations.